Me. Okay.
Oh, God, this is going to take a long time.
No.
Hello and welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we get to know interesting people by asking them about their favorite book. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and last week, when I talked to my mom about how books have influenced her travels, I started thinking that I'd also like to talk to my daughter about her recent experiences studying the novels of Jane Austen while she was in England. So today's episode is another Strauss family affair, because I'm so lucky I landed an interview with my daughter, Ella. Ella and I spent all of her last semester texting each other our wildly different opinions about Jane Austen. But unlike her, I never actually studied Jane Austen in college, at least not in any way that I can remember. My love of Jane Austen comes purely from my heart and from watching Colin Firth jump into the lake in his undershirt in the BBC adaptation. Yeah, if you know, you know. Ella's understanding comes from her studies, and it has been so much fun talking to her about what she's learned, what she liked, and what she didn't like. And as usual, no conversation with my daughter would be complete without a digression into a conversation about Harry Styles, because we take pop culture very seriously around here. Hi, Ella. Welcome back to the Best Book Ever podcast.
Hi, Mom. Thank you for having me.
Now, you have not been on the show since the very first Kids YA episode. Yeah, so now you get to be here as an adult. How exciting.
Wow.
It's really an important step in every child's life, I think, to appear on my show.
That's what I've heard.
Tell our listeners the role of reading in your life.
Well, given that you raised me, I pretty much have been reading my whole life. I don't really remember a time that I wasn't reading, because we transitioned from you reading to me just reading and then never stopping.
So last week we had your grandma, my mother, on the show, and we had a long talk about how her reading has influenced her travels. And it got me thinking to your recent educational experience, which is why I wanted to invite you on the show this week. Will you tell our listeners what you just did in your schooling?
Yes. So for my final semester of university, I studied abroad at the University of Leicester in the UK, where I took a creative writing class and a Jane Austen class and a late Victorian Gothic literature class.
Tell us why specifically you chose the Jane Austen class.
Jane Austen is one of those authors that I have always wanted to get into, but I've never done it because I've been intimidated. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity because, one, it was my last semester, and two, it would be a good way to be sort of immersed into her literature and be guided through it, so it wasn't as daunting.
So you had not read any Jane Austen before then? I
had, quote unquote, read Pride and Prejudice in high school.
What does that mean?
It means I think I just maybe read a tiny bit and then looked at the Spark Notes. But other than that, that's the only thing I had.
So you had no real grasp of what Jane Austen was all about or what she did or anything? Like, what would you say you went in there with? What was your impression of Jane Austen as you went in there?
Well, I think my impression of Jane Austen was entirely skewed about wealthy young women who are trying to find a husband. And I knew about a few of the adaptations, the film adaptations, which is so not what the novels are about, that I had a very skewed perspective going into it.
In the class, which of her books did you read?
We read Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Persuasion, and Northanger Abbey.
Which ones did you like?
I liked Pride and Prejudice. I liked Emma a lot, but my favorite was Sense and Sensibility by a long shot.
Why?
I thought the conflict of that one was the most interesting because I'm a sucker for female interpersonal conflicts, and this one about two sisters battling between acting out of sense or out of sensibility, I just was really drawn to. And I love that journey of theirs trying to navigate the world while being dominated by those characteristics. And I thought it was funny and entertaining.
This is an experience that I've never had that I think sounds so interesting. What is it like to do a deep study of an author in the place where they wrote the work?
It felt very surreal. Like, I remember one time after class going up to the professor and asking where the house that Pemberley, Mr. Darcy's house, was based off of, like where I could find that. And she was like, oh, it's in this city. It's not that far. You just take the train. A couple of Jane Austen's novels either mention or are set in Bath. And then I went on a trip with a few students to Bath, and it was just wild walking around knowing that she lived there. I've never felt so much like I went through a time machine when I was walking through Bath. It felt like I was back in time.
But your professor of that class didn't just focus on the books themselves, right?
Yes. So for every novel that we read, we watched one film adaptation, and it was cool because we didn't always watch the one that was the most, I'm going to use this loosely, but loyal to the novel. For example, for Emma, we watched Clueless, and for Pride and Prejudice, we watched a Bollywood adaptation called Bride and Prejudice.
What were the conversations in the class about the adaptations?
It was a lot about how it changed from the novel. So what's different in the movie adaptation, and how does that affect the narrative? In the novels, the love story is like the skeleton, but the meat of the story comes from the heroine and her internal conflict and her learning to become, in Jane Austen's eyes, a proper woman. And the love story is just sort of the framework through which Jane Austen tells a story of a young woman growing into herself, essentially. But the movies kind of flip that, where it's like the framework is a coming-of-age story, but it's really all about the love story. Because, for example, Sense and Sensibility is my favorite one, and the end, the big dramatic ending, is the huge wedding between Marianne and Colonel Brandon, the end of the movie. And Marianne has like a 10-second scene of self-reflection where she tells Eleanor she wished she acted more like her. Whereas in the novel, it's in just a couple sentences like, oh yeah, and then they got married. But then there are paragraphs about how this changed Marianne as a person and about her self-reflection. The point wasn't for her to get married, it was for her to self-reflect and to grow.
And the other thing I never fully understood is that her books are really about economics, right?
Yes, but it's such a specific group of women. She was showing what it was like to be a young, wealthy, or upper middle class white woman in the early 19th century.
Do you think her work is relevant today?
I think it's relevant as historical documentation of what it was like for these specific women. It's not a wide variety of women, but it's a detailed representation of what it was like. Even though she was advocating for women, she's still very much conservative in what she believes a woman's role is. She pointed out that women didn't have financial freedom, but not really as blatantly as, for example, some of the film adaptations, which is another reason they give you sort of a false understanding of Jane Austen.
That's looking through a 2023 lens, isn't it?
Well, I think the film is trying to be more feminist than the movie. The youngest sister, Margaret, is sort of like a gateway for 21st century audiences to understand that universe, because she's asking all the sort of dumb questions that we would ask. Like, well, why can't we do this? Why can't women just get this? And she's not like that in the novel because there's no need for that gateway.
Do you imagine ever rereading Jane Austen?
Yes, because a couple of them I didn't finish the last few chapters because we had already moved on to the next one. And so I had to just read the outlines of the last few chapters. So I want to go back and read them in their entirety, but not all in such quick succession because they blurred together. And I think to some extent that made me appreciate them less because they all felt like the same story, even though they're definitely not. So I think that I would, but with long breaks in between each one.
Let's settle this once and for all. What do we think of Mr. Darcy?
Well, my opinions of him go back and forth because at first, reading the novel and then watching both the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice and the Bollywood Bride and Prejudice, I did not like him at all. And he poorly justifies his rudeness. He, treats her badly and then says to her later, well, I just didn't realize I was in love with you and that's why I was so cruel to you. That's toxic relationship 101. And I think that a lot of people like him because they've seen the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice, and he's a little bit more I'm quiet and a little bit rude because I'm so shy and mysterious. But in the book, he's just kind of a jerk.
I still disagree with you.
Why?
I have always seen him as, if you're the richest guy in town and every single mother is throwing her daughter at you because you have wealth, he doesn't know who to trust. He knows that all the girls only like him because of his money, or all the girls' moms only like him because they want his title and his wealth. Of course he's going to be a jerk because he knows. Lizzie's mom has been very clear what she wants, which is money. And I think that's fair.
I think it would be fair if he said that. And if he owned up to that and apologized for that, but instead he's like, oh, I was just too in love with you, and that's why I was so mean to you.
Right, but he had no reason to say that to her, given how crazy he thought her family was. Which, by the way, her family was not crazy. They just didn't want to be in poverty.
Yeah, Mrs. Bennet is the hero of that story.
Oh, tell me more.
She's the only one who really realizes the gravity of the situation, that she has 5 daughters, and if they're not married, they will be living on the streets. And it's very male-gazy to say she's acting crazy, but she's just mothering. She's trying to not let her daughters starve. She's acting with the intensity that the situation requires.
And the movies really do her a disservice, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because she's hilarious. Mm-hmm. She's always a nut.
Mm-hmm. And I think Jane Austen does that a little bit. She definitely, there is irony with Mrs. Bennet because she is supposed to be a little bit funny even in the novels. But I think in reality, she gets it and she's just mama bearing.
Do you think Jane Austen's feminist?
One of the things we talked about in the class was, well, how could she be feminist? She's only talking about, white gentry women from the early 1800s. But that's all that she knew to talk about. I think she was a conservative feminist of her time. Because at the time that she was writing and publishing, even though it was a small group of women, it was feminism to advocate for them and to show that they were multifaceted people and not just objects of desire, but people who could do the desiring. And yeah, I think that was radical enough for its time. By today's standards, no, she's not a feminist. But it also adds another layer of complexity because you look at her contemporaries, such as Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote A Vindication on the Rights of Women, and that was very radical. And so...
What was radical about it?
Well, because it's a long essay or collection about why women should get the same sort of respect as men, specifically in education. And Jane Austen wouldn't come close to something as radical as that. So that's why I think she's a conservative feminist, because she was doing some of the work, but she wasn't that radical, because she was still, it didn't seem like she was against a woman's place being in the home or being a wife and mother.
Do you recommend Jane Austen? To your reading friends, do you recommend that they try her out?
It's hard to say because I think just reading it, like just raw dogging the books.
No, don't like that.
Okay. I think just reading them without any academic guidance would make them a lot more difficult to appreciate. And they might honestly be boring if you don't have someone guiding you through them and people to talk about it with and adaptations to compare it to. But I mean, I would probably recommend like Emma. Emma's fun and enjoyable and silly, and then you can compare it to Clueless because like everybody likes Clueless. But I wouldn't recommend Mansfield Park. That one's a bit draggy and boring. Do you feel that it's generational, the hatred of Mr. Darcy, because of the Colin Firth adaptation? Like, your generation loves him because of that reason solely, and my generation doesn't because we weren't raised on that movie. Or on
I do
series.
not understand your generation's dislike of Mr. Darcy. It just baffles me.
I just explained it to you.
It still doesn't. I mean, I see what you're saying academically, but I think it's weird and crazy and stupid.
Well, can't argue with that, folks.
Yes, I do think it's generational. I do think that he's always a smoldering, wealthy man. Yeah, we all love him. Of course we do.
That's like how my generation feels about like Timothée Chalamet. I feel like.
Oh, he's just a little boy.
Yeah.
He's not a smoldering, wealthy man.
I think people are attracted to him because he's got that like vampire thing with the angular face and the dark hair.
No, that's not a smolder. He's too delicate to be a Mr. Darcy.
Oh.
Don't you think?
When I think of smolder, I can only think of Tangled. And
yes. Yes. And Eugene has
Here comes the smolder.
Here comes the smolder. He's got that rough edge. Yeah. Okay. Can a blonde man smolder? No. No, let's be serious about this.
Okay.
Come on, I need you to take this seriously.
Okay, I'm trying to think of any blonde man.
Blonde men cannot smolder. Can Chris Hemsworth smolder?
Oh, I feel like if anyone can smolder, Chris Hemsworth can smolder.
I don't think so.
Is a smolder the same thing as in Zoolander? You know, blue steel?
No. Because a blue steel is a pose to get attention. Mm-hmm. And a smolder is an emotion to get women.
Wait, are you trying to tell me that a smolder like naturally occurs? Like Mr. Darcy's face just naturally makes a smolder and that's somehow attractive?
Yes. That's what I'm saying. Yes. Like, he's just sitting in the back of the ballroom, pissed off that all these mothers are throwing their daughters at him, and he just wants to go home and read a good book, but he's looking around, smoldering at the room. And then he happens to catch Lizzie's eye, and he smolders in her direction. And what are you supposed to do with that? If
a man smoldered in my direction, I cannot explain to you how quickly I would walk the other way.
Okay. So
if a man blue steeled in my direction, however, that is a different story.
Okay. So it is a generational divide because Timmy Chalamet cannot smolder, but he can blue steel. For sure. You Gen Zers, you like that sort of delicate Peter Pan vibe, I think. Mr. Darcy is not a Peter Pan.
Right, he's a dick.
He is not!
I kind of feel like... Did you like Mr. Darcy before you saw the Colin Firth adaptation?
Definitely not as much.
Well, there you go. Another reason why the adaptations give people a false understanding of Jane Austen literature. Because Mr. Darcy seems like an appealing person in the adaptation. But if you had just read the book, I wonder if you would feel the same way.
That is a fair question. Do you know that Matthew McFadden, like, that has become a meme? That moment, there's a moment in that movie where he clasps his hands.
God, the hand scene. That is a great scene. I love that moment. Why? I really do. Because it's so subtle and it's like it conveys so much tension, but it's really like delicately done. It's not like forcing anyone together and forcing them to have chemistry or having like really graphic sex to show that there's sexual tension. It's just like, you just, in that moment, you feel what he's feeling and you see what he's thinking, and you can feel like you know how it is when you like have a crush on someone and then you touch their hand and then you're like, oh my God, but you can't show it on the outside, but he just barely does. Like, you can feel that his hand is like electric right then, and he's like got the shivers a little bit, and he's like trying to shake it off. So he's like flexing his hand and he's like, keep it together.
So you like that Darcy?
I don't like that Darcy. I just like that scene because I think that scene is really well done. You know what I want? I want a lesbian retelling of Pride and Prejudice. I want a Ms. Darcy. Okay, who would be the best actress to play Ms. Darcy?
Janelle Monáe.
Ooh.
Oh.
Wait, which actress can smolder the best?
Janelle Monáe. What about Harry Styles as Mr. Darcy?
That is so incorrect. That is wrong for so many reasons. This is everything that we are trying to fight against. Okay? Okay. First of all, I cannot take Harry Styles serious in any role. I love Harry Styles. This is just going to further the narrative that we like Mr. Darcy. Because then, the next thing you know, all the 13-year-old girls who are being introduced to Mr. Darcy as Harry Styles, they're going to be like, I love him. He's so charismatic. And they're not going to see the realities of his character because they're so blinded by Harry Styles.
Or, hear me out, Harry Styles will humanize the character.
How so?
You will go in with a prejudice of already liking this performer, and so you will have a predilection to forgive his, as you call it, dickish behavior. Also, look at this. Look at our sound balance there. That's where you started yelling at me about Harry Styles.
Well, I don't know how you can expect to bring up Harry Styles and expect that the sound balance would not get thrown off.
Fair point.
Harry Styles is not Mr. Darcy because that is just furthering a narrative that I firmly disapprove of.
And Harry Styles can't smolder.
He can probably smolder.
He cannot smolder. He's too much of a bebe. You know who can smolder? In One Direction, only Zayn can smolder. And what's his name, who just got those big cheek implants? Liam. He can smolder.
Okay, I can see that. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. Oh, this is perfect. We have a gender-bending retelling of Pride and Prejudice in which the One Direction boys are the Bennets.
Oh my God.
Give me the... Yes, it's time to bring out the chart.
So the members of One Direction are Harry, Niall, Louis, Liam, and Zayn. And tell me the sisters.
Jane, Lizzie, Mary, Lydia, and Kitty.
Okay, so Louis' Lydia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Zayn.
Which one of them is a little bit... Maybe Zayn is Jane. Their names rhyme too, so it's meant to be.
Okay, Zayn is Jane. You're going to get it down to Harry is Lizzie. Is that what we're going for here?
Probably. Okay. I'd be fine with Harry as Lizzie. Okay, then Niall has to be Kitty, and Harry is Lizzie, and Liam is Mary. Because everyone forgets about Mary.
Okay. I think we've done some really important cultural work here.
I agree. Oh my gosh, and I guess that would make Mrs. Bennet Simon Cowell.
Yeah, that feels right.
It feels so right. Honestly, I've never felt anything so right. Don't you love when it just all works out?
It's the universe decided it was true. So, Ella, what are you reading right now?
So, I just finished We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, which I had read years ago, but I wanted to reread it so that I could read the prequel. And the fun thing about rereading We Were Liars is I read it so long ago that I forgot the twist at the end, so I got to experience it all over again.
And you didn't, like, it didn't come back to you as you started reading?
I kind of a little bit knew, but not really, and so it was still a shock.
I love it when that happens. See, There's such benefits to being forgetful.
I know. And then right now I'm reading The End of Men by Christina Sweeney Baird, and that's about an outbreak of a virus that only affects men. And so then the women sort of have to save the world. And so it's a shift in the power dynamics because the men are all sick. and the women have to come together and save the universe, pretty much.
Do the women start acting like the men and start wars? And
I don't know yet. I just started it, so we'll see.
One thing that you and I have been talking about a lot since you got home from England is how excited you are to finally get your reading life back, your funsies reading life, as you call it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you're looking forward to reading over your break before you start grad school.
I need a break from deeply academic books, so I will not be reading those this summer. But I also don't want it to be super light reading. This sounds kind of dumb, but I really just want to read like good books, like that are the right balance of complex but also enjoyable and don't take all of my brain power to get through. Like I really want to read Addie LaRue. I really want to read that. I want to get through all of Eve Ensler's catalog. Maybe I'll try a Colleen Hoover. I really want to go back to Kate Atkinson and read Life After Life. I want to read Bunny. I want to read The Descent by my Bahama mama, Lisa Marie. Love you, bestie.
She's going to be delighted to hear this. That's a lot to... What are you doing here? You need to go read. You have a lot to read this summer.
Well, I'm trying to get out of the deadline mindset of reading, so It's just whenever I want to.
Are you someone who can DNF a book you don't like?
What's DNF?
DNF is...
Oh, do not finish?
Did not finish or do not finish. And if you DNF, that means you just got in the middle of it and went, this is not for me. I DNF all the time. But so many people I've had on the show are physically incapable of it.
Yeah, I think I am because I can think of multiple books that I've done that, and they were both Stephen King. Sorry about it.
Okay, my darling girl. You are weird and hilarious.
I wonder how much of this is actually going to go in.
Oh, all of it.
Oh, I love that.
Every minute of it.
You're welcome. Audiences everywhere.
You're welcome, Internet. I hope you will come back anytime you want to tell me about a book or come up with weird pop cultural theories.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I definitely will. And thank you for having me again.
Thank you for making it weird again.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm hanging up on you now. Bookworms, I would love to hear what you think about Jane Austen books and movie adaptations. Let me know your thoughts over on Instagram at Best Book Ever Podcast. Links to everything Ella and I discussed are available in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review wherever you're listening. If you want to learn more about my weekly guests, as well as get a little peek into what I'm reading and listening to in my free time, subscribe to my weekly pod newsletter at bestbookeverpodcast.substack.com. The newsletter is free, but once you get there, you'll see a few different paid options if you want to help me keep the candles burning over here in my reading cave. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, I will see you at the library.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Just kidding.
Try saying it nicer.
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me. What a joyous occasion it has been.